A chill clung to the early morning air as Mira Collins stepped out of the hospital, her scrubs wrinkled and marked by a long night's work. The fluorescent lights behind her flickered softly, leaving a faint hum in her ears. After 12 hours of caring for patients who could barely speak, she felt hollow, held together only by routine and stubborn will. Tugging her jacket close, she waited at the bus stop and checked her worn wallet. A lone $5 bill lay inside, beside a fading photograph of her mother. Rent was due soon. Food was gone. Payday was days away. Her chest tightened, though she kept her expression calm. Back at the small apartment she shared with her friend Tessa, Mira collapsed onto the couch. Tessa looked up from her laptop, brows knitting at the sight of her. "You look like gravity gave up on you," she said, her tone gentle. Mira only managed a tired laugh. Tessa shut the laptop and scooted closer. "You need a reset." "Unless it's a reset on my bank account pass," Mira murmured. "A blind date," Tessa announced. "Just coffee." "The guy's name is something like Drew or Dane. He's supposedly sweet, has a job, likes dogs." "Old jazz records, grounded, normal." "I'm broke," Myra protested quietly. "He won't care," Tessa insisted. "Just say yes." The request lingered. Mira had been wrapped in grief since her mother's passing the year before, burying the ache under shifts and sleepless nights. Love felt distant. But something in Tessa's voice carried a promise that life didn't have to stay so heavy. So Myra sighed. "Fine, one coffee." The next evening, she found herself stepping into Shaw and Sage Café. Warm wood, soft lighting, and the rich scent of roasted beans wrapped around her. She ordered the cheapest drink she could, $5 gone in a blink, and settled at a quiet table in the back. Minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. No message. No date. Only the lukewarm latte sitting untouched. Just as she grabbed her purse to leave, footsteps approached. A tall man in a dark apron stopped at her table. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice steady but hesitant. Mira looked up. He had kind eyes, and though he wore the cafe uniform, he didn't carry himself like the other baristas. "I'm fine," she answered, though he clearly sensed otherwise. Lucas Hawley hadn't meant for anyone to recognize him. He quietly went undercover at every new Shaw and Sage opening, just to feel connected to the work he once loved. He moved like someone used to boardrooms, not espresso machines, but the apron offered a rare kind of anonymity. From the moment he noticed Mira sitting alone with untouched coffee and a strained stillness in her posture, something in him shifted. He tried to lighten the moment. "You picked the best drink on the menu," he said. She raised an eyebrow. Bold statement for someone who smells like burnt milk. He blinked, then laughed an unexpected, slightly awkward sound that pulled the edge off her exhaustion. When she pointed out the napkin dispenser he'd loaded backward, he rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Still learning," he admitted. For a few minutes they exchanged small, gentle conversation. Nothing dramatic. Nothing forced. Just enough to make the space feel softer. Mira admitted that certain blends reminded her of hospital waiting rooms, of nights when small comforts mattered most. Lucas told her he believed people clung to warm drinks not for the flavor, but for the feeling of holding something steady when life spun too fast. Before either could say more, a sudden thud echoed through the cafe. A woman near the window collapsed. Chairs scraped. Gasps filled the air. But Myra's instincts took over, instantly calm, precise. She knelt beside the woman, checked vitals, gave firm instructions. Within minutes, the stranger stirred. Lucas watched, frozen in awe. The woman he'd seen barely holding herself together stood unshaken while chaos erupted around her. She carried strength in a way that didn't demand attention but commanded respect. Mira Collins, whoever she was, had left him undone. The next day, he found himself replaying the cafe footage, not out of suspicion, but admiration. Her resolve, her steadiness, her quiet exhaustion that she wore like armor, it held something he didn't know how to forget. By midday, the bell above the cafe jingled, and her voice reached him before he turned. Mira stepped inside in her scrubs and cardigan, asking softly about the woman she'd helped. Relief washed over her when Lucas told her the customer was stable. "Can I get you something?" "On the house?" he offered. "Just tea," she said with a cautious smile. This time, she gave her name. "I'm Myra." "Lucas," he replied, handing her the warm cup. From then on, she returned more often, not intentionally, but because the cafe became the only place where the world seemed to slow down for her. And Lucas, always behind the counter, had a drink waiting each time. Cinnamon vanilla, oat milk lattes, honey-steeped hibiscus teas, something he called cocoa for weary nurses. She pretended to roll her eyes at the inventiveness, but her cheeks always warmed. Their conversations drifted deeper. Mira opened up about her mother's illness, about debt, about the endless fight to help people who were fading before her eyes. Lucas listened with a stillness that wasn't performative, it was personal. Sometimes he shared glimpses of his own past, hinting at a younger brother whose absence shaped every corner of his life. Though feelings grew between them, Mira stayed guarded. She reminded herself he was just a barista, someone living paycheck to paycheck, someone she shouldn't burden with her fractured life, and yet she kept going back. Then one quiet afternoon, everything changed. Tessa sent her a LinkedIn article announcing that Lucas Halle, CEO of Shaw and Sage, had been working incognito at the very cafe Mira visited. His photograph confirmed it instantly. Her heart dropped. He knew everything about her struggles, her debt, her grief. And she knew nothing about him. For the first time in weeks, Mira didn't go to the cafe. Days passed. Lucas waited for her, then finally searched for her himself. Rain poured as he stood outside the hospital, soaked and breathless when she finally appeared. "So," she said coolly, "the CEO came to see me?" "I came to explain," he answered. She tried to walk past, but his sincerity stopped her. He spoke not as a CEO defending himself, but as a man who had never expected someone to look at him without judgment, without expectation, without the shadow of his title. And as rain softened between them, something fragile but real began to mend. Rain clung to their clothing as Mira and Lucas stood beneath the pale glow of the hospital entrance. The storm softened into a whisper, but the tension between them remained tight, fragile as glass. Mira crossed her arms, guarding herself with a cool resolve that hid the tremor in her chest. Lucas searched her face, his breath uneven, as though he feared one wrong word might shatter any chance he had left. "You lied," she said quietly. Not with words maybe, but with silence. He nodded, rain dripping from his hair. "You're right. And I should have told you the truth the moment I realized what you meant to me." His voice was rough, barely steady. "But I've spent years watching people treat me differently because of the position I hold. When you came into the cafe, you looked at me like I was just a person. I wasn't ready to lose that." She wanted to stay angry. She needed the anger to keep her from feeling the deeper wound, betrayal layered over grief she had never fully healed. But as she studied him, soaked in trembling, she sensed the fear behind his confession. It wasn't arrogance or manipulation. It was loneliness. Still, pain pressed behind her ribs. "You had no right to know everything about my life while I didn't even know your last name," she said. "You're right again," Lucas answered. "And if you want me to walk away, I will. But not before telling you this. Meeting you changed everything for me. You weren't a distraction. You weren't a story. You were the first honest moment I've had in a very long time." The wind carried away his words, but their weight remained. Mira lowered her eyes, torn between instinct and emotion. She didn't respond, not with words, not that night. Instead, she turned toward the hospital, leaving him in the rain with a quiet, Uncertain glance that wasn't rejection, just confusion. For the next week, she avoided the cafe. Avoided him. Work piled high, exhaustion thickened around her, and her small apartment felt colder than usual. Tessa noticed immediately. "He's been calling," Tessa said one evening, lifting Mira's buzzing phone from the couch. "I'm not saying you owe him anything. But I'm also not saying you don't like him." Mira sank deeper into the cushions. "It's more complicated than that, but is it?" Tessa countered softly. "Has he ever treated you like you were less than him? He made you drinks and took your napkin critiques. For all you knew, he was living on tips." That truth stung not because it was wrong, but because it was painfully accurate. Mira pulled the blanket around her shoulders, trying to disappear into the fabric. Late that night, unable to sleep, she wandered into the quiet kitchen and stared at her phone. Her thumb hovered over Lucas's name. By the time she convinced herself to put the phone down, a message appeared. "If you're not ready to talk, I understand. But I'm here. Whenever you are. It wasn't dramatic. Not pleading. Just steady. Something within her softened. 3 days later, during her break, Mira walked past Shaw and Sage. Out of habit, she slowed. Inside, Lucas wasn't behind the counter. A different barista filled cups. A different manager gave instructions. The absence struck her harder than she expected. She stepped inside anyway. The manager recognized her. "You must be Mira," he said. "Lucas told us to give you this." He handed her a sealed envelope. Her pulse quickened, but she waited until she was seated at a corner table before opening it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "You changed the way I see everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to earn your trust slowly, honestly, without titles in the way. If you want to talk, I'll be on the rooftop garden of the main Shaw and Sage building every evening at 6. If you don't come, I'll stop hoping. But I won't stop caring." Below the message was a tiny sketch of a coffee cup with awkwardly drawn steam. She almost laughed, almost cried. She folded the note carefully and tucked it into her bag. At 5:53 that evening, Mira stood in front of the Shaw and Sage headquarters. The building rose like a glass monolith, glowing warm against the darkening sky. She hesitated at the revolving doors, her heart beat too loud. By 5:56. She was in the elevator. By 5:59. She was stepping onto the rooftop. The garden was softly lit. String lights weaving through climbing vines and potted herbs. Lucas stood near the railing, hands in his pockets, the city stretching endlessly behind him. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something gentler, relief so deep it made him exhale like he'd been holding his breath for days. "You came," he said quietly. She nodded. "I read your letter." Emotion swelled in his gaze, but he didn't rush toward her. He kept his distance, letting her choose. "I shouldn't have disappeared," Mira began. "I just didn't know what was real anymore." "And now?" Lucas asked. "I'm still figuring it out," she admitted. "But I know you weren't being cruel. Just afraid." A tentative calm settled between them. She walked to a small bench beneath the string lights. Lucas followed at a respectful pace. They sat with space between them, the silence not sharp this time, just contemplative. "What do you want from me?" she asked softly. "Nothing you're not ready to give," Lucas answered. "Not a relationship. Not promises, just the chance to know you the way you've let me know you already." Mira's breath hitched, not from fear, but from the gentleness in his tone. She closed her eyes briefly, seeing flashes of her mother, the long nights, the relentless grief. Then the softness of the cafe lights, the clumsy napkin dispenser. His laugh. When she opened her eyes, she faced him fully. "Then we start over," she said. Not as a nurse and a CEO, not as someone hiding and someone hurt. Just two people who met over a very average cup of coffee. A quiet smile crossed his lips. "I'd like that." A breeze stirred the garden. carrying the faint scent of basil and rain. For the first time in a long while, Mira didn't feel the weight of the world pressing so sharply against her. She still carried grief, debt, exhaustion, but Lucas didn't try to erase any of it. He simply fit into the spaces where life had worn her thin. They stayed on the rooftop until the sky turned indigo and the city lights shimmered below. Their words were slow, unhurried, weaving between laughter and long pauses. Lucas admitted he hadn't known how to be his mother's version of a leader, only that he wanted to build places where people felt safe. Mira spoke of the patience she lost, holding her voice steady even when memory cracked at the edges, somewhere between stories. Their hands found each other, not with urgency, but with quiet certainty. As night deepened, the garden lights glowed around them, casting warm halos on the leaves. They didn't speak about the future or define the moment. They didn't need to. What began as an uneven collision of mistakes and misunderstandings had found a softer rhythm. Before leaving, Mira glanced at Lucas's hand still lightly holding hers. "Next time," she said, "you're letting me critique your coffee again." A laugh escaped him, warm and unguarded. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They walked back toward the elevator together, steps aligned, shadows brushing. And for the first time since her mother's passing, Mira felt something lift inside her, something gentle, something new, something like hope finding its way home.